All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Very excited. As Dan alluded to, I'm going to be introducing Greg Hyam, who we know Greg as a customer. He's a SVP and CIO at Marketo. But really want to talk about more broadly how can customer success teams and generally the whole customer-facing organization work with IT as a partner. And with a lot of great dialogue planned. Just a little intro on Greg. So Greg is currently running IT at Marketo. Previously was the CIO of Front Range and NetWitness, and was actually originally the VP of Customer Support, you heard me right, at Epiphany. And I don't know how many of you remember Epiphany. It was actually a very innovative CRM marketing company in the 1990s. And Greg is going to come talk about IT, but he has the perspective of all of you as well. So it's a really great opportunity. He's also the best dressed IT person I've ever met. So I will say kudos to him on that. So with a little applause, please welcome Greg Hyam from Marketo. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Thank you, Greg. So in case you're wondering, we'll have to debrief later. Greg just joined us, so he probably doesn't know about the football helmet or the fire alarms that went off or the hip-hop music or Jeffrey Moore. But we'll catch you up later on all that. So would you like to wear the helmet during the interview?
I'm good, thank you.
It gives you superpowers. Okay, so first of all, as we just talked about, Marketo just went public a couple weeks ago now, I guess. Probably feels like yesterday. Huge congratulations.
Thank you very much.
What did you do to start the day, to celebrate the day?
How fun. So we had a live feed from NASDAQ to the office in San Mateo. So we participated remotely with, there were a handful of executives there and some back at the home front. And so with this live feed, we had virtually the entire headquarters in the office at 6 a.m., which for anybody who's part of a development team knows that that's an incredibly rare occurrence. But it was so fun. It was the champagne toast at opening and watching the stock jump up. Anybody who's watched it, knock wood, it's jumped up well and seems to be performing and being accepted well in the market. But that celebration of, look, it's just it's a milestone in the journey, right? So it's a fun milestone, but it's just a milestone. But it was a lot of fun, and the team had a good time celebrating. So.
Awesome. Are there some pictures that are unauthorized that you can't share from the evening?
I can tell you, but I'd have to kill you.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. So, one of the things I think a lot of people wonder about IT now is individual employees can actually install applications and buy applications themselves. Some people call this the consumerization of IT. And so they don't always have to go through IT. And so what's the role of IT in this new world?
Yeah, I think there's an evolution. And, historically it's been about, I think about it more on the operational side. So the iron and the architecture and the foundational stuff. And, in this day and age, it's not just the consumerization, but the subscription economy. It's much more about how do you partner with the business to effectively deliver solutions. So, for me, we're the epitome of a current organization. 99+% of my fabric is in the cloud. Unsurprising considering what we do, but that's a very different dynamic for those maybe that are a little bit more tied to the old school way of thinking around, who gets a new laptop or what router do I put in or, how many servers do I have in it. I don't even have a data center other than the customer facing operational aspect. I don't have an internal IT data center. It doesn't exist for me. I have, some switches that give power to the desktop and phones, and that's it. So, the current IT leadership focus is and should be on how to partner effectively with the business and deliver solutions to the company that will differentiate.
That's great. Is there a limit to how many business applications a company can actually absorb?
There should be. Joking aside, it was one of the first things as I joined the Marketo team was to do an inventory of what's out there and really kind of get my hands around it. And I was surprised yet not really that there was one application, production application in the cloud for every 4 employees in the company. Because without some IT leadership, the business is out there acquiring what they need or think they need without necessarily a lot of awareness of what else is going on in the company. And so there's this acquisition of technology, and part of what I bring and people like me bring is that focus less on the technology and on the shiny objects and more on, that process side and what are we trying to solve for, how are we solving it? Sometimes, technology is a great addition, as we can attest, but very often it's a process improvement or, refinement of the people or skill. So there's this balance that goes with it. Having said that, I don't think there's a number that's a magic number that you stay below or above, or it's about making sure you understand what you're trying to solve for and that you have the right solutions to solve for it.
That's great. And a lot of people in the room, what you might have seen earlier, are from SaaS companies. Would you ever consider buying a non-SaaS application? I don't even know if they exist anymore, but just kidding. But would you buy one in your company?
Yeah, it's funny, I would. And, remember, I've done this for 30 years, so I've kind of gone through that transition. I would be hard-pressed to want to go buy the infrastructure and resources to install an application within the facility. It's a little hard for me to fathom now. Now, there's a time and a place for everything, so never say never. And, there's certainly some bigger apps that work better on-prem than maybe they're not quite ready for the cloud. So assuming there was a need for something like that, you have to make that decision. And, there's pros and cons of all this, right, prem or cloud, but the reality is that's not where I want to staff my resources or spend the company money, is on things that sit in a data center, right? Let's find the pros that can go do it like Gainsight and allow them to do it for you.
That's great, thanks. One of the things that I think a lot of, actually probably folks in this room and others have felt about IT, if you don't work in IT, is it's the team that tells you that you can't do something, or it's not allowed, or it's not secure, or we can do it ourselves and you should, we'll take care of that. How's that changed? Is that an antiquated notion, or is that how companies function? No,
I think a lot of that's got to do with the leadership, the IT leadership that the company is embracing. And I think if you have a good partner in IT that can work with it, it's truly business focused and can work with the business to understand what's trying to get done, and that's an enabler, not a gatekeeper. And there's a huge difference. Our business comes to it. They want to come to us because we can help them find solutions, and we can deploy them and secure them and integrate them quickly and effectively, because that's what we do. That's our focus. So for me, that speaks more to the leadership or lack thereof within IT. If you have the right partner, you tend to go there to get your solutions delivered.
That's great. Do you think that if you look at things that get installed without IT, probably even in your organization, some things do, those 300 or 200 applications, some of them came in without IT. Do you want to stop them? Do you want to control them? Do you want to monitor them? Like what do you want to do about all that stuff that people are doing outside of your...
We don't have any rogue activity at Marquette.
Nothing at all, I'm sure, right? Totally like
with
that.
With a plethora of developers, right? Yeah, kidding aside, we want to know about it for a few reasons. And, when I think about acquiring any asset, right, we want to make sure we understand what we're acquiring so we can acquire it intelligently. So want to negotiate effectively. And people in the business in various areas may or may not have that skill. So that's something that we should be able to bring, is the ability to effectively negotiate or help negotiate. We want to make sure that we account for the assets we acquire so we know what we have. Ultimately, we have to likely integrate and secure them and administer them. So they're just being aware of that. And so it's less about control, it's more about awareness. And becomes more of an issue as a public company, right? There's a different level of scrutiny and focus on compliance. So really being aware of what's in your ecosystem is critically important. You put the company at risk without knowing it. So again, I think if you have the right partner, the right relationship, and Bill, who is just up here, he's one of my best partners, and you don't see that with IT and sales. That's a great example. Yeah. But if you have that kind of relationship with the business, I think you end up in a different place, and there's a little less rogue activity, although it never goes away because we hire super smart, creative people.
That's great. That's great. Well, one of the reasons we brought you here is I think a lot of people in the audience are looking at technology, not just Gainsight, but support systems and knowledge bases, and they're looking at learning systems, and they want to figure out how they should work with IT. And sometimes, honestly, I think folks are scared sometimes of IT or worried that it'll derail their project. So if you talk to customer success teams, how do you think they should think about working with IT and try to align well with the way you think about things?
I think it's a partnership, right? I don't want to beat that word to death, but for me, the ownership around ensuring that relationship can be successful is on me and people like me. So if I'm approachable, if I'm fairly intelligent and have a smart team that can deliver effectively, and I execute in a solid way, I'm going to help enable that relationship and that dialogue. And part of it is back to the kind of old school way of thinking as IT leader around the shiny objects and the technology. If you're able to speak to business on their business terms with each of the functional areas, it helps enable that, right? So it brings those barriers down. And so I think, again, it's about establishing relationships and gaining trust based on delivery.
I'm sure a bunch of people are wondering whether you can be the CIO of their company too, but we'll deal with that later. If you think about customer success, the whole theme of this conference, and you obviously don't just work with customer success teams at Marketo, you work with lots of teams, sales, marketing. Where does customer success rank in that hierarchy of IT priorities?
Yeah, look, I don't want to put anything higher than anything else, but I would say, clearly that customer success is our number one priority, period. Right in this subscription-based economy, and I saw the hands go up, that retention and customer satisfaction and that it's hugely important. So while it's, I have a lot of focus on partnering with, my pal Bill on ensuring sales can sell well and effectively and they have the right process and tooling to do that, and that my marketing team, can market well and development can develop quick and, as bug-free as possible, really ensuring our customer success. And we as a company are extremely customer focused. That is my number one priority.
That's great. When you think about customer success, it obviously probably expands beyond the customer success team per se. Talk to me about how you bring all the stakeholders together in the company around the customer and what processes you use and what folks here can learn from that.
So I'll take it in two directions. One is at a high level, how we prioritize, the deliverables that we're going to go partner with the business to go do. The first things I did as I came into Marketo is to pull together my executive counterparts and create a fairly light and efficient steering committee to say, I'm not going to go prioritize what we're going to deliver. We're going to do that as a group. Because if we're doing it right, it's not IT for IT's sake. It's delivering solutions for you all. So I'll help guide it, and ultimately we'll put together the resourcing and I'll help y'all understand what the time frame looks like. And so it's a very collaborative approach to how we prioritize what we're going to go focus on in support of the corporate initiatives. When it comes to customer success specifically, to me it's much bigger than customer success as a team or an organization. And this is where Gainsight for me really plays a magic role. But I want our people in finance to be able to understand customer activity from a financial perspective, or people in marketing to understand where, referenceability, or we talked a little bit about having folks that are certified, the whole certification program, really understanding what our customers are doing holistically touches virtually every piece of our business, and it's not just customer success. So I think it's much bigger than that. And if we do it well and we have that good view, everybody in the company eventually will participate in that.
That's great. What mistakes do you think non-technical people make? Because probably a number of people in the room didn't start their careers in IT or development. What mistakes do people make in coming to IT with requirements and projects? What would you, if you learned across all your companies, what do you think non-technical people can do differently in working with IT?
Again, I mentioned my focus is that, the typical people process in technology, and technology is, lower when I first start peeling it back and working with the business. Very often, folks will look for a panacea with a piece of software, and that's rarely the answer. There's typically a blend in there. So I think, really focusing on what are we trying to solve for. And then have a dialogue with your IT partners. Say, what's the most effective way to do that? What does that look like? Do we have anything already in the portfolio that can help solve for that? Do we need to go get something? If we need to go get it, how do we do that intelligently? How do we make sure we get requirements well understood, and we can quickly understand who in that space can provide the best solution, and we can have them demo again. It's again a dialogue. rather than stapling technology to the solution.
Well, on that note, one of the things I think people deal with rolling out any product, whether it's Salesforce or probably Marketo, is stitching these systems together and the kind of data integration. And we're not going to go into the technical side of that, but how should customer-facing teams think about data and data integration and how all these applications talk to each other?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is my responsibility, and your IT leader's responsibility to partner with you on that. For me, I want to make sure that my business partners have the solutions they need to solve their business problems. They're delivered effectively, and they actually deliver the solution. But in the back end, I've got to effectively integrate them and secure them. And for me, that's some of the heavy lifting, IT white noise that I'm supposed to deal with. And it's supposed to be magic to my business partners. It's supposed to happen. And ultimately, I and my counterparts need to own a fair amount of that. It's my perspective.
That's great. Well, switching gears, there are a lot of vendors in the room that sell solutions. How many of you have Marketo as a customer already? And how many of you would like Marketo as a customer? So what...
We got a guy that was just up here that would love to have a chat with those of you that just raised your hand.
And if you think about salespeople and customer success people working with you and vendors working with you, what things do people do well and what mistakes, what bugs you,
So, the easy answer, and this was not a setup, not a stick man, but the Gainsight approach to this and your involvement as a leader in the company and the rest of the team, that pure and very honest customer focus, your full commitment to ensuring success, that's a model that anybody else who's selling should really pay attention to. Bill mentioned it on our side. It's something that we're very, very focused on as well. And ensuring we have that success, especially in the subscription economy, people, I can go somewhere else next year, right? And if it's not, so that quickly leads into, what doesn't go well with me. One is a vendor that won't partner with me, that won't work with me, and I can be tough. But look, I always want, my goal is to get the best price for my company, and, ultimately make sure my vendors are healthy. Running you into the ground does nobody any good, right? So there's a balance point in there, and working together to get there in a respectful and professional way. Taking a hard line, or conversely, the dump and run, which in this economy doesn't work. But establishing a relationship. It's funny, I did a personal reference for a Salesforce account executive, and CIOs don't do that, right? We don't ever say nice things about salespeople, right? But she was phenomenal. What made her so good is that she was intimately concerned about our success, and it was very genuine. And she wanted to work with a business. It wasn't just an IT relationship. It was really understanding and spending the time in the cycles. And it was, very apparent to me. It was clearly, we had just negotiated an agreement that would lock us up to a term, and she was looking to make sure, it's back to Bill's point that, we were successful, and that, and clearly she's always got an eye on, what can we upsell, right? But she did it in a very professional way, and very engaging, and a very partner way. And to me, that's what really sets apart a strong vendor.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. So we actually have folks on the sides of the room that can do questions. So if somebody has a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone delivered to you. So questions for Greg? I've got a couple more as we go. Got a question here in the front of the room. Could we get a mic to the gentleman here in the front? Great, thank you.
Thanks. John Herstein from Box. It seems to me sort of in the, thanks for being a customer. It seems to me in the old days, IT was sort of a good neutral party for decision-making around prioritization and governance and so forth around systems. And one of the challenges that we have, and I suspect others have, is Salesforce in particular is becoming a really key platform for a lot of business processes. And that system is fundamentally owned by the sales team, not by IT. And I'm wondering sort of what your perspective is on IT ownership of sort of these line of business applications, and sort of how and when you guys insert yourselves and when you kind of hang back and let the business drive priorities around systems.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to repeat it. It's Mike.
Yeah, no, it's Mike. We're good.
It's a great question. And again, not to beat that partnership to death, but I think for me, fundamentally, I need to own the back-end systems. I need to ensure they're secure. that we've got good compliance, that all that kind of back-end heavy lifting stuff, and that I'm delivering to the business the usability behind it. So I think again, I think if somebody was to ask who owns Salesforce for us, it's ironically a three-way partnership. Bill and I own it together on the sales side, and our customer services team, because we're on the Service Cloud as well, own it with me as well. So it's a triangulation, and it's how we approach it. Anytime we do anything with a platform, we do it together, very collaboratively. Does that answer it?
And have you, as your team, have you gotten more involved in Salesforce over the last year? Has that been a process as you've kind of gotten to, kind of get more knowledgeable and more aware of what the sales team's doing?
Intimately.
Yeah.
Yeah. We last summer we pulled the support team off of an alternative solution onto service, and so that's really become our customer system of record. So for me, making sure I have the right technical skills, both administratively and developmentally, to support that system was critical. And so, yeah, that was a big piece of what I did out of the gate, is to make sure we had those skills.
That's great. Yeah, we're seeing that as a trend across a lot of people. It's a very good question, because I think Salesforce is becoming the center of the world, and it's no longer just a sales system. So what you guys have gone through is pretty consistent. More questions from the audience? Okay, raise your hand if you got a question. We got one over there.
Hi, what kind of metrics do you look to from your vendors/partners when you're renewing or considering the renewal discussion?
What kind of metrics? When I look at a renewal, the first thing I do is talk to my business partners to gauge their success. So, is the solution working for them? But the reality is I've got a pretty clear calendar around our renewal, so I'm doing that a little bit proactively. It's an ironic bit of a reverse approach, but I know when our renewals are coming up, and I want to talk to our internal business users to understand whether it's working for them, whether they want to renew it. Is there more that we need? Is there less that we need? And then we begin that dialogue. So for me, and remember, we're still a fairly small organization. It's not about metrics per se. It's about a dialogue with the business to understand whether the solution is providing the value they need or not. And if not, early in the process, we begin to refine those requirements now that they've embraced that for some period of time, and then evaluating that against the market in the current window, in case there is a move that's required.
Excellent. Next question. We got one over here.
Hi, Galen Baggs with eMobis.
Hi, Galen.
I know often in a SaaS model, you're sold to the C-level executive like yourself, and then the people that use the software are, I won't call it lower level employees, but, a broader base. After it's deployed, what level of engagement and data do you as a C-level executive want to see how it's been deployed to your team, given the fact that you're probably not the primary user of the software?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about Marketo as well. So I don't completely agree with the premise that they're being sold to me, because they're not, right? And again, back to that alignment. At Marketo, we take a lot of pride in selling directly to the marketer, right? And they try not to deal with people like me in procurement, right? It's an operational spend, and so a lot of the application sale into my organization is focused directly to the business. Very little of it is focused to me. They don't, for good reason. They don't want to deal with me. I can be pretty hard. The trick is to make sure you have a good relationship, and I want to go back and I'm trying to make sure I'm very specific in answering your question and not going around it too far. Ask it again.
I guess the question is, in a software where the decision is made to purchase, it's a big purchase, it's Salesforce, for example, you're going to be involved in that process.
Yep.
The VP of sales is going to be involved in that process. The sales reps are using it. The sales managers are using it. So the customer success people are probably dealing with, the end users, with the sales managers. But we assume you want to know some information on engagement, on success of the deployment of the product. So we know you're also dealing with 20 different software deployments. What's too much and what's not enough information, and what's the way to communicate that to the C-level executives to say, from a vendor's perspective, to say, hey, this was a successful deployment?
Yeah, I think it's the follow-up that just, there's a reasonable, coming out of an engagement, right? A reasonable 15-minute, 7-slide deck that says, this is what we said we would do. This is when we said we would do it. This is what we've done. These are the results we're seeing, right? So just a quick synopsis, I think is sufficient. Again, for me, ultimately, I'll engage with the business directly to understand whether it's successful or not. So I'm quite candidly a little less concerned what I get from the vendor, though it's the vendor's responsibility to articulate that success, and they certainly should. I'm going to have internal dialogue with my business.
Great.
Hope that helps.
Thank you, Greg. More questions? Okay, good. Do we have any more in the room? Okay, one back there. Thank you.
Hi, Dipinder Singh from Covisint. Everybody talked about renewals and retention. I think one of the things that our customers look for is innovation and product roadmap when it times comes for renewals. As a CIO, how do you incorporate feedback from your CSM team when you're setting your product roadmaps?
When we're setting our internal roadmaps, or when I'm dealing with a vendor? So Marketo's roadmap. I'm probably not the rightest person to answer that question. Our biz dev guys are the ones, and our product management and marketing guys are the ones that are doing that.
But it sounds like you do. I think Marketo does take a lot of feedback from the customer success team as part of your planning process. Product managers, I'm sure, are getting that feedback from them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bill talked a little bit about our community, and
Yeah.
the Marketo community is extraordinarily loyal, and it's growing. You may have heard the nation, and there's that feedback, that dialogue is direct and constant. And if you look at what we deliver back to our customers, that feedback loop is far and away the #1 driver for what's being released back, not only from a product perspective, but enhancements. Far outweighs in any other channel. So it is direct, and it is through multiple channels in the business right back in. And again, it's still a fairly small group, and those relationships are really tight. So our success team, back to the product management, product marketing teams, they're very solid channels.
Great. I think we have time for one or two final questions. You have one back there? Great.
Hi, Rashmi from IBM.
Hi.
What are some of your key criteria when choosing tools for customer success?
We have a pretty pure process in evaluating solutions, and so again, the whole people, process, technology thing. But when it comes to choosing a technology or a solution, we do a really good job of gathering requirements, which I think is a really critical step. Very often, people will go, oh, I like that one, or I saw that, in an ad, or really understanding, again, what we're trying to solve for and gathering those requirements and then prioritizing them. And then evaluating against the solutions in the marketplace. Very often what we'll do is get to the top 3 pretty easily, and then we'll allow those top 3 vendors to demo back to us against our very specific and consistent requirements. So it becomes a bit of an instant bake-off, and the Gainsight team went through that process directly. They can tell you about it.
It was super easy. I'm just kidding. It was some work, but it was very good.
But it's very clear. It's a very clean process. It's unemotional. It's unbiased. What are we trying to solve for? What are the prioritized requirements? How do we evaluate the solutions against those? And then it becomes negotiation, implementation, delivery.
Excellent. All right, let's take one more question. Got one back here in the back.
Thanks. As you guys are now public, have you had to drop top vendors because of the new controls, and how have you gone about communicating to them in advance what they need to do to keep your business?
That's a great question. Not yet is the answer. I do anticipate that happening. Remember, it's been all of 3 weeks that we've been public, so we're just starting. Although I did have part of my background and part of why I'm here, I have a fairly deep, SOX background, compliance background. So, my partner in finance and I spent an hour yesterday in, putting together the heat map of the portfolio around where we think, that top right risk is most prevalent. So we could begin focusing on that. So already out of the gate, we're beginning that process. And I do expect that there, may be some vendors that because some of the solutions are a bit immature, may not be able to make that cut. For me, it's identifying very quickly and then having a very direct, very candid dialogue. Where the solutions are critical, I'd prefer to give that vendor the opportunity to solve for it, right, if they can, if that's an option. And if not, it's a respectful separation so that we can ensure we have the right solution for the company.
Excellent. I'm going to close out with one final question for you. So you're very unique in that you're in the CIO role, but you started as one of the people here as a head of customer support at Epiphany years ago. Which is a harder job?
Yours, by far. Yeah, I mean, the short story there is, I came up in the trenches, a degree in computer technology, and started to grow my leadership skills in IT. And as I began this process of interacting with my business counterparts, I didn't feel that I had enough business experience to do it effectively. And so I began pursuing and was fortunately given the opportunity to run a number of pieces of the business. And, one, to Nick's point, was customer support. And I had an advocacy team and a success team, so I'm intimately familiar with it. It's a tough job. The reality is while my focus is global and across the organization, it's very internal. It's very, and that's much easier. Though not easy, it's much easier than the challenge of dealing with customers and their happiness. It's a very, very hard job, and hats off to all of you.
Well, great. Well, please join me in thanking Greg for his time, and thanks to all of you for your questions. Thanks, man. Great job.